I am Abigail Thompson, 22 years old, and I share a face with my twin sister Amanda. We graduated college on the same day, walked the stage 30 seconds apart. That evening at dinner, our parents presented Amanda with an envelope. Inside, first-class tickets for a European tour. They turned to me next, smiling. I received a $10 gift card to a coffee shop chain. My hands shook as I thanked them. The contrast was so stark, so public, so final. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, hit like and subscribe if family favoritism has touched your life too. Let me take you through the journey that started long before graduation day. Amanda and I entered the world 7 minutes apart. I was born first, something my mother never failed to mention had caused more complications. We were identical in appearance, with matching auburn hair and hazel eyes that confused teachers and neighbors throughout our childhood. But despite our identical DNA, our parents seemed to see something fundamentally different in us. The earliest memory I have of noticing the disparity was our 5th birthday. We both received dolls seemingly identical at first glance. But Amanda's came with a wardrobe of tiny outfits and accessories, while mine had just the dress it wore. When I asked about it, Mom patted my head and said, "You never seemed that interested in playing dress-up, Abby. We're just respecting your different interests." That became the pattern. The differences in how we were treated were always subtle enough to explain away, always with a logical justification that made me question my own perception. Our parents insisted they loved us equally, but simply responded to our different personalities. Amanda was social and vibrant, while I was practical and independent. In elementary school, I excelled academically. My report cards filled with "As earned a quick, good job, Abby," and were promptly displayed on the refrigerator, only to be replaced by grocery lists within days. Meanwhile, Amanda's B- in math warranted celebratory ice cream because she'd tried so hard and improved. My parents attended all of Amanda's soccer games, cheering enthusiastically from the sidelines, but frequently missed my debate competitions due to scheduling conflicts. The Christmas I was 11 crystallized the pattern. Amanda received a beautiful new bicycle with a basket and streamers. I got practical gifts books, a scientific calculator, and new school supplies. "You're so studious, Abby," my father explained. "We wanted to support your academic interests." By middle school, the gap widened. Amanda's room underwent a complete makeover, with a new bed set, decorative pillows, and posters of her favorite bands. My room remained largely unchanged since childhood, with the explanation that I didn't seem to care much about those things. When I mentioned wanting to redecorate too, my parents said we couldn't afford to do both rooms at once, and Amanda's needed it more. The most glaring disparity came on our 16th birthday. Amanda received a lavish Sweet 16 party at a local venue with 50 guests, a professional DJ, and a custom cake. I got a small family dinner with our parents and grandparents at my favorite restaurant. When I asked why we couldn't have a joint celebration, my mother said, "You've always been more introverted, Abby. We thought you'd be uncomfortable with such a big event." The truth was, I'd never been given the option. Throughout these years, I developed coping mechanisms. I learned to expect less, ask for less, need less. I buried myself in books and studies, building a world where I could control the outcomes through effort and intelligence. I convinced myself that I didn't care about material things or social events. I told myself I was mature for being self-sufficient. Amanda wasn't cruel about her preferential treatment. In many ways, she seemed oblivious to it, accepting our parents' attention as natural. We shared a typical sisterly relationship with the usual fights and reconciliations, but an undercurrent of resentment began flowing beneath the surface of my affection for her. I hated that feeling more than the favoritism itself. As we navigated high school, I built an identity around being the responsible academic twin. I joined the debate team student government and tutored younger students. I received academic accolades and scholarship opportunities. My parents acknowledged these achievements with obligatory pride, but without the enthusiasm they showed for Amanda's social successes homecoming court cheer team captain prom committee. The differences hurt, but I became adept at rationalizing them. Perhaps my parents simply didn't understand my interests. Maybe they connected better with Amanda's extroverted personality. I told myself that when we reached adulthood, when we achieved true independence, the playing field would finally level. College would be my fresh start, a place to be valued for exactly who I was. I couldn't have been more wrong. The college application process illuminated the disparities between Amanda and me with painful clarity. I researched schools meticulously prioritizing academic programs and scholarship opportunities. Amanda applied only to our parents' alma mater, a prestigious private university with a renowned communications program. When acceptance letters arrived, I'd secured a nearly full academic scholarship to my top choice school. My parents responded with casual approval. "That's smart, Abby." Always practical with finances. A week later, Amanda was accepted to our parents' university with no scholarship. They popped champagne and called relatives to share the news. The summer before college, my parents took Amanda on a special shopping trip to furnish her dorm room. They purchased a new laptop, premium bedding, decorative items, and a complete wardrobe refresh. For me, they provided a modest budget for essentials and suggested I take furniture from home. "Your scholarship doesn't cover living expenses," my father reminded me. "You'll need to be careful with money." During freshman orientation, both my parents drove Amanda to her campus, helped her move in, and stayed 2 extra days to explore the area with her. I drove myself to my university 3 hours away, unloaded my belongings alone, and received a brief phone call that evening checking if I'd arrived safely. The pattern continued throughout our undergraduate years. When Amanda struggled with her course load, our parents paid for a private tutor. When I mentioned the intensity of my advanced literature seminars, they suggested I visit the free campus writing center. Amanda received monthly care packages filled with snacks, gift cards, and seasonal decorations for her apartment. I received occasional texts asking how classes were going. The summer after sophomore year highlighted the disparity further. Amanda was selected for a study abroad program in Spain. Our parents covered all expenses beyond the program fees, including spending money for weekend trips to neighboring countries. That same summer, I worked 2 jobs: mornings at a local bookstore and evenings waiting tables. I was saving for a laptop to replace my failing one as my parents insisted computer upgrades were a personal expense. Despite these challenges, college became my sanctuary. Away from the constant comparisons to my twin, I flourished academically and emotionally. I maintained my scholarship with a perfect GPA and developed meaningful friendships with peers who appreciated me for exactly who I was. My English literature professors praised my analytical skills and writing talents. One professor, Dr. Winters, became a mentor who encouraged me to pursue graduate studies. In my junior year, I took an abnormal psychology elective that inadvertently provided insight into my family dynamics. During a lecture on family systems and psychological roles, I recognized the golden child divided by scapegoat dynamic that had defined my relationship with Amanda. For the first time, I had language to describe my experiences. The validation was both painful and liberating. With this new understanding, I began establishing boundaries with my family. I limited my visits home to major holidays and kept conversations superficial. I declined invitations to family events that felt obligatory rather than welcoming. I built a support network of friends who knew my full story and affirmed that my feelings were justified. Amanda and I drifted further apart during these years. Her social media showcased weekend trips funded by our parents' new clothing they'd purchased and family dinners during their frequent visits to her campus. Meanwhile, I hadn't seen them in person for nearly 6 months when our senior year began. As graduation approached, I allowed myself to hope. Surely, completing my degree summa cum laude, securing a job offer before graduation, and doing it all with minimal financial support would finally earn their recognition. Amanda was graduating with a respectable but average GPA and uncertain career prospects. Perhaps now the scales would balance. The week before graduation, I called home to confirm arrangements. My mother answered with excitement in her voice, but it quickly became clear she was primarily focused on Amanda's graduation from the parents' alma mater. The fact that our ceremonies were on the same weekend seemed to be an inconvenience rather than a double celebration. They would attend both, they assured me, though they would need to leave my ceremony early to make it to Amanda's the following day. I ended that call with a familiar knot in my stomach, but I pushed aside my apprehension. Graduation was meant to be a culmination of achievement and possibility. I wouldn't let old patterns taint this milestone. Something told me this time would be different. This time, they would see me. Graduation morning arrived with perfect May weather. Sunlight streamed through the curtains as I awoke in my childhood bedroom where I'd returned for the weekend festivities. Downstairs, I could hear my mother preparing breakfast, the clatter of pans and murmur of conversation floating up the stairs. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hands over my secondhand dress I'd carefully steamed the night before, and headed down to join the family. The kitchen scene stopped me at the threshold. My parents surrounded Amanda at the table, admiring her new graduation outfit, a designer dress with matching shoes and jewelry they'd purchased specially for the occasion. Gift bags with tissue paper spilling out sat by her place setting. My father was refilling her coffee cup while my mother arranged fresh strawberries on her plate. "Good morning," I announced, entering the room. "Abby, there you are," my mother said, glancing up briefly. "Grab some breakfast. We need to leave in 40 minutes to beat traffic." I filled a plate with eggs and toast, settling into the empty chair across from Amanda, who was excitedly describing the graduation party her friends were hosting that evening. No one commented on my appearance or asked about my feelings on the day. The contrast was striking but familiar. "Amanda, don't forget your graduation gift is coming later today," my father mentioned with a conspiratorial wink. My mother swatted his arm playfully. "Don't spoil the surprise." The drive to my university campus was filled with Amanda's chatter about her own upcoming ceremony the next day. My parents nodded along enthusiastically, asking questions about which of her friends' parents would be attending and where they planned to take photos. I gazed out the window, mentally rehearsing the walk across the stage, trying to focus on my own achievement rather than the familiar sting of being peripheral. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotion. When the dean announced Abigail Thompson, summa cum laude, I walked across the stage with my head high, accepting my diploma with pride that was entirely my own. From the audience, I heard my friend Rachel's distinctive cheer and spotted her family standing to applaud. My own parents offered polite applause, my father briefly lowering his phone after taking a perfunctory photo. At the post-ceremony reception, my parents mentioned my academic honors as an aside while introducing themselves to my friends' families. "Yes, Abby's always been studious," my mother said dismissively before turning the conversation to Amanda's communications degree and internships. Dr. Winters approached, shaking my hand warmly and congratulating me on completing the best senior thesis she'd advised in a decade. As she praised my analytical skills and future potential, I noticed my parents' strained smiles and shifting feet. They seemed uncomfortable with this extended recognition of my achievements, eager to move on. "We should head to dinner," my father finally interrupted. "Our reservation is at 6. The restaurant was expensive, chosen by my parents without consulting me. Throughout the meal, conversation revolved around Amanda's job prospects and the next day's ceremony. My father ordered champagne to celebrate both our graduates, but his toast focused primarily on Amanda's journey of personal growth, with only a brief nod to my academic dedication. After dessert plates were cleared, my father clinked his glass again. "Now for the moment we've been waiting for," he announced. Graduation gifts. My heart quickened despite years of conditioned expectations. Perhaps this time would be different. My father reached into his jacket pocket and removed an envelope with dramatic flair, sliding it across the table to Amanda. "For our social butterfly who's ready to spread her wings even wider." Amanda opened it with theatrical excitement, gasping as she removed several papers. Plane tickets to Europe, first class, and hotel reservations. Her voice rose with each revelation. A 3-week tour of Paris, Rome, Barcelona, and London. Oh my God! She jumped up to embrace our parents, who beamed with pleasure at her reaction. The tickets had cost thousands, I calculated automatically. My parents weren't wealthy. This represented significant financial sacrifice. "Now for you, Abby," my mother said, reaching into her purse. She passed me a small envelope that felt conspicuously light. I opened it slowly already, knowing what I would find would not compare. Inside was a gift card to a national coffee chain. The amount printed on it, $10. "We know how much you love your coffee while studying," my father explained. "Thought it would be practical for job interviews." The restaurant seemed to spin around me. $10 wouldn't cover 2 specialty drinks. Amanda's European tour versus my coffee card. The disparity was so enormous, so public, so impossible to rationalize that, for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely audible. Amanda glanced between my gift and hers, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face before she resumed describing which European landmarks she planned to visit. "Excuse me," I murmured, sliding my chair back. "Restroom." In the sanctuary of a locked stall, I pressed my forehead against the cool metal partition and allowed silent tears to fall. The hurt was physical, a pressure in my chest that threatened to crush my lungs. This wasn't about money or gifts, it was about value, about worth, about seeing someone for who they are and celebrating their journey. The bathroom door opened and I quickly wiped my face. "Abby." It was Rachel, my closest college friend whose family had joined us for dinner. "Are you okay?" I unlocked the stall, revealing my reddened eyes. "I saw what happened," she said quietly. That wasn't right. Her validation unleashed fresh tears. "Am I crazy? Am I being entitled?" I asked. "No," Rachel said firmly. "That was beyond inappropriate. It was cruel." She hugged me tightly, then held my shoulders. "You don't deserve this treatment. You never have." After washing my face with cold water, I applied fresh mascara and returned to the table with practiced composure. I smiled and participated in conversation for the remainder of the evening, an Oscar-worthy performance honed through years of hiding disappointment. The drive home passed in excruciating silence, at least for me. Amanda chattered excitedly about passport requirements and international adapters while I stared out the window, the gift card burning a hole in my clutch. That night, lying in my childhood bed, I could hear my parents in the next room discussing Amanda's trip flight times, suggested itineraries, shopping needs. Not once did they mention me or question whether their disparate gifts had been appropriate. In that moment, something hardened inside me. A decision crystallized that would alter the course of my relationship with my family forever. The morning after graduation dawned gray and drizzly, mirroring my emotional state. I lay in bed listening to the sounds of my family preparing for Amanda's ceremony, hurried footsteps, excited voices, the rustle of packages. No one knocked to check if I was awake or planned to join them. When I finally emerged, my mother was helping Amanda with her hair. "There you are," she said, without looking away from her task. "We left coffee in the pot." We need to leave in 20 minutes to get good seats. I poured coffee into a travel mug, noticing the bitter irony that I could have used my new gift card instead of drinking their coffee. As I leaned against the counter, my father entered, adjusting his tie. "Dad," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "Can we talk about last night?" He glanced at his watch. "Can it wait? We're on a schedule." "It's about the graduation gifts," I persisted. "Don't you think there was a significant disparity?" His expression shifted from distraction to irritation. "Abby, this isn't the time for one of your comparisons. When is the time after Amanda leaves for Europe while I'm applying for jobs with my $10 coffee card?" My mother appeared in the doorway, frowning. "You're being ridiculous. Amanda needs the cultural experience for her career path. You've always been practical. We got you something useful." "A $10 gift card isn't useful," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "It's an afterthought." "You're being too sensitive," my father dismissed. "We don't have time for this now." Amanda joined us, her graduation cap already secured to her perfectly styled hair. She glanced between us, sensing the tension. "Everything okay?" "Your sister is upset about graduation gifts," my mother explained with an eye roll that communicated volumes. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. "I can bring you back something nice from Europe, Abby." Her offer, though well-intended, only twisted the knife deeper. Even my sister saw the disparity but assumed a souvenir could bridge the chasm. "That's not the point," I said, but they were already gathering keys and cameras, checking the time, mentally moving on to Amanda's day. Left alone in the suddenly silent house, I wandered into my father's home office, drawn by a need to understand the magnitude of what had happened. His desk calendar caught my eye, a bank appointment scheduled for the previous month with a note: Europe loan finalization. They had taken out a loan for Amanda's trip. The revelation hit like a physical blow. While I had worked through college, taken out minimal student loans, and budgeted carefully, they had willingly gone into debt to fund Amanda's European tour. I sank into my father's desk chair as memories flooded back with new context: my request for help with apartment security deposit for off-campus housing junior year. "We just don't have extra funds right now," coincided with Amanda's spring break trip to Miami. The summer I ate ramen noodles for weeks to afford textbooks, while Amanda posted Instagram photos from a family weekend at a lakeside resort. The winter break, I couldn't come home because I couldn't afford the flight. Yet they flew to Amanda's campus for Parents' Weekend the very next month. For years, I had accepted their explanation that I was simply more independent, more practical, less needy than my sister. But the truth was starker: they had consistently chosen to invest their emotional and financial resources in Amanda at my expense. That evening, I picked at leftovers alone while scrolling through social media. Amanda's graduation photos already populated my feed, our parents beaming beside her with proud smiles I couldn't remember ever being directed toward me. Among the congratulatory comments my mother had written, "Our beautiful graduate Europe awaits our world traveler." Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed in my childhood bed, physically exhausted but mentally racing. By morning, I had developed insomnia-induced dark circles and a complete lack of appetite. When my family returned from a celebratory breakfast, another event to which I hadn't been invited, I attempted one more conversation. "I've been thinking about yesterday," I began as they unpacked shopping bags containing new luggage for Amanda's trip. "I need you to understand how hurtful the difference in our graduation gifts was." My mother sighed dramatically. "Are you still on about this?" "Yes, because it represents a pattern that's existed our entire lives." "What pattern?" my father demanded. "We've always given you both what you needed. What Amanda needed was always deemed more important, more expensive, more worthy of sacrifice." I countered, my voice shaking. "Do you realize you took out a loan for her trip while giving me a gift card that won't even buy 2 lattes? My parents exchanged glances I couldn't interpret. Amanda quietly slipped upstairs, avoiding the confrontation. "We make different decisions for each of you based on your personalities," my mother insisted. "You've never valued travel or experiences the way Amanda does." "How would you know?" I asked. "You've never asked me." The conversation circled without resolution, my parents defensive and dismissive by turns. Eventually, they retreated behind the excuse of needing to help Amanda prepare for her departure the following week. That night, I wrote them a letter pouring out years of hurt-specific examples of disparate treatment and the impact it had on my self-worth. I described the achievements I'd accomplished largely without their support, and how their graduation gifts had made their priorities devastatingly clear. I left the letter on the kitchen table the next morning before leaving for a walk, hoping distance would give them space to absorb my words. When I returned hours later, the letter remained untouched. The house was empty. They had taken Amanda shopping for travel essentials. Looking around my childhood home, I made a decision that felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. I wouldn't stay until August as planned. I would leave immediately, building my life on my own terms without waiting for validation that would never come. I called Rachel, who immediately offered her spare room until I found housing near my new job. Within hours, I had packed my belongings, written a brief note explaining my departure, and loaded my car. As I pulled away from the house where I'd grown up feeling perpetually secondary, I felt the weight of expectations lifting from my shoulders. The pain remained a deep ache of familial rejection, but alongside it grew a seedling of determination. If my family couldn't see my worth, I would build a life among people who could. Rachel's apartment became my temporary sanctuary. Her parents had gifted her the security deposit as a graduation present, and the irony wasn't lost on me as I settled onto her pull-out couch that first night. The following morning, she left for work with a spare key and a reassuring squeeze of my shoulder. "Stay as long as you need." Alone in the unfamiliar apartment, the magnitude of my decision hit me. I had effectively severed daily ties with my family, with no concrete plan beyond the job offer that wouldn't start for another month. My savings would cover basic expenses until my first paycheck, but the margins were tight. I spent that first week applying for interim work, securing a part-time position at a local bookstore that could bridge the financial gap. Each evening when Rachel returned from her internship, we sat on her tiny balcony sharing budget wine and brutal honesty. Her unwavering support became my lifeline. "Have they called?" she asked on the fifth evening. My mother texted to ask where I'd taken the extra towels from the linen closet. I replied with a hollow laugh. Not why I left, just about the towels. Rachel's outrage on my behalf was validating, but it couldn't fill the family-shaped hole in my life. I maintained minimal contact, brief text responses, avoiding phone calls, while focusing on practical matters like changing my mailing address and setting up a new bank account separate from the one my parents had co-signed during college. Meanwhile, Amanda's social media chronicled her pre-Europe shopping sprees and preparation activities, each post garnering enthusiastic comments from our parents. The contrast between their investment in her journey and indifference to mine couldn't have been starker. 2 weeks after my departure, Amanda left for Europe. My parents drove her to the international airport 3 hours away, documented the entire experience with dozens of photos, and posted emotional captions about sending our baby girl on the adventure of a lifetime. Not once in this flurry of activity did they acknowledge my absence or new living situation. The morning after Amanda's departure, I received my first substantial text from my mother. "Now that Amanda's trip is underway, we'd love to have you home for Sunday dinner this weekend." The message ignited something dark and painful inside me. I had become the backup child, worthy of attention only in Amanda's absence. For the first time in my life, I declined a family obligation without offering an excuse. "No, thank you." The curt response triggered an uncharacteristic phone call from my father. "Your mother is upset," he began without greeting. "What's going on with you?" "I've been clear about what's going on," I replied. No one listened. "This sulking is immature, Abby. You've always been the sensible one." "That's the problem, Dad. You've put us in boxes our entire lives. Amanda gets to be spontaneous and deserving of experiences. I get to be sensible and grateful for afterthoughts." The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with his exasperated declaration that I should call when you're ready to be reasonable. That night was my lowest point. Curled on Rachel's couch, scrolling through Amanda's first European photos, our parents had already liked and commented enthusiastically on each one. I confronted the possibility of permanently estranging myself from my family. The thought was simultaneously liberating and devastating. Rachel found me there, tears silently streaming down my face. "I think you need more than friend support," she said gently. "The university clinic offers alumni counseling services on a sliding scale." The next day, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Chen, a family therapist with the University Counseling Center. Our first session was largely intake information, but her final question lingered with me. "What would healing look like for you, Abigail?" I had no answer. I'd been so focused on the hurt that I hadn't considered what resolution might entail. In our second session, Dr. Chen introduced me to the concept of radical acceptance alongside firm boundaries. "We cannot change your parents," she explained, "but we can change how their behavior affects your self-worth and your responses to their patterns." Over the next 3 weeks, therapy became the foundation for what I came to call the plan, a comprehensive strategy for building my life on my own terms while establishing healthier family boundaries. The plan began with financial independence. I opened a separate bank account, created a strict budget accounting for my entry-level salary, researched affordable apartment options, and calculated transportation costs. I sold unused textbooks and clothing for additional funds, building a modest emergency cushion. Next came emotional boundaries. I crafted template responses for family communications, committed to limiting social media checks of Amanda's travels to once weekly, and identified specific behaviors from my parents I would no longer tolerate without comment. With Dr. Chen's guidance, I practiced direct statements. "That comparison is hurtful. I don't accept that characterization of me. I need you to acknowledge my accomplishment." The professional component included accelerating my timeline for beginning my editorial assistant position, requesting additional training opportunities, and researching evening certificate programs that could enhance my credentials. Most importantly, the plan included building my chosen family, scheduling regular activities with supportive friends, joining a book club in my new neighborhood, reconnecting with university mentors, and researching community volunteer opportunities to expand my network. With this framework established, I felt incrementally more grounded each day. Small victories accumulated: finding an affordable studio apartment within walking distance of public transportation, negotiating an early start date with my new employer, establishing a morning routine that prioritized my physical and mental well-being. The day Amanda posted photos from the Eiffel Tower, my parents commenting, "Living vicariously through you," coincided with me signing my first apartment lease. The juxtaposition was perfect. While they invested thousands in Amanda's temporary experience, I was building something lasting for myself. When Sunday dinner invitations resumed, I declined politely but firmly. When my mother called with gossip about family friends, I limited conversations to 15 minutes. When my father texted complaints about a neighbor's landscaping, I responded with neutral acknowledgments rather than the emotional engagement he sought. Each boundary felt simultaneously terrifying and strengthening. Each independent decision reinforced that I could build a life without their validation. Each therapy session refined my understanding of family dynamics I couldn't change but could respond to differently. 6 weeks after graduation, the plan was fully operational. I had secured housing, begun my professional position, established new routines, and maintained minimal but civil contact with my parents. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed from acute agony to a manageable ache. The night before Amanda was scheduled to return from Europe, I received a group text from my mother: "Welcome home dinner for Amanda this Saturday. Entire family will be there. Your presence expected." For the first time, the command didn't trigger anxiety or obligation. I responded simply, "I have prior commitments. Please give Amanda my regards." The freedom in that small refusal was intoxicating. I was no longer the daughter desperately seeking approval or inclusion. I was becoming someone who valued herself enough to expect better treatment and walk away when it wasn't provided. As I fell asleep that night in my new apartment surrounded by furniture I'd selected and paid for myself, I realized I was genuinely looking forward to tomorrow. The feeling was unfamiliar but unmistakable hope. My first month at Meridian Publishing unfolded with unexpected brightness. The editorial assistant position challenged me intellectually while providing structure during a personally turbulent time. My supervisor, Denise, recognized my capabilities early and steadily increased my responsibilities. By week 3, I was reviewing manuscript submissions independently and providing substantive feedback. Each morning, I established rituals that reinforced my new independence: brewing coffee in the French press I'd purchased with my first paycheck, not my graduation gift card, which remained unused in my wallet; reading industry newsletters before work, walking the 4 blocks to the office while listening to literary podcasts. These small acts of self-determination accumulated into a foundation of confidence. My studio apartment gradually transformed from an empty shell to a personal sanctuary. Unlike my childhood bedroom, which had remained largely unchanged since middle school, this space reflected my current tastes and priorities. I furnished it slowly, selectively, each purchase carefully considered against my budget. Weekend mornings were spent at neighborhood garage sales and thrift stores, hunting for bookshelves and reading lamps. The blue armchair I splurged on became my favorite spot, positioned perfectly beneath the apartment's single large window. Contact with my family remained minimal and superficial. My mother's texts about neighborhood gossip received brief acknowledgments. My father's occasional messages about car maintenance suggestions went similarly unanswered or received short thanks. I declined 3 consecutive Sunday dinner invitations with increasingly direct language. "I'm busy, then I have other plans. Finally, I'm not comfortable with family gatherings right now." Amanda returned from Europe and immediately flooded social media with hundreds of photos. Our parents shared and commented on each one, publicly celebrating her adventures. She texted me directly several times, her messages, a disorienting mix of European highlights and oblique references to family tension. "Miss you, parents are being weird, we should catch up soon." I responded cordially but maintained distance, uncertain whether she truly recognized the dysfunctional dynamics or simply noticed my absence. The resentment I'd harbored toward her began slowly dissolving as therapy helped me recognize she hadn't created our parents' favoritism, merely benefited from it. Rachel remained my steadfast support, visiting my new apartment with housewarming gifts and regular invitations to social events. Through her, I met other recent graduates navigating early adulthood, forming connections based on mutual interests rather than familial obligation. For the first time in years, I began building friendships without the shadow of being the responsible twin coloring others' perceptions. Dating entered my life unexpectedly when William, a graphic designer from Meridian's art department, asked me to coffee after we collaborated on a cover concept. Our first date extended from afternoon coffee to evening dinner conversation, flowing easily between literature discussions and personal disclosures. By our third date, I'd shared abbreviated versions of my family dynamics, watching carefully for his reaction. That explains why you flinch slightly whenever someone mentions their parents, he observed thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I think you're handling it with remarkable grace. His validation was nice, but no longer necessary. The growing distance from my family situation had strengthened my internal barometer for reasonable treatment. I could recognize others' supportive behaviors without desperately clinging to them. Financial independence proved more challenging than emotional autonomy. Despite careful budgeting unexpected expenses, a prescription not covered by insurance, a necessary computer repair, professional clothing for work events stretched my limited resources. I picked up weekend shifts at a local bookstore, building a modest cushion in my savings account through sheer determination and minimal sleep. One evening in late July, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously to discover my grandmother, my father's mother, on the line. "Abigail, it's Grandma Eleanor," she said, her voice warm but tentative. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," I replied, surprised. We had always been cordial but not particularly close. "I've been thinking about you," she continued. "Your parents mentioned you've moved out on your own." I tensed, expecting another family member attempting to broker reconciliation. "Yes, I have an apartment near my new job." "That's wonderful, dear. I wondered if I might visit sometime, perhaps bring a housewarming gift." The request was unexpected but not unwelcome. "I'd like that, Grandma." We arranged for her visit the following weekend. I spent Friday evening cleaning my small space, feeling uncharacteristically nervous about her judgment. When she arrived Saturday afternoon, her arms laden with packages, her warm smile immediately eased my anxiety. "What a lovely home you've created," she said, surveying the apartment with genuine appreciation. "It reminds me of my first place after college, small but perfectly yours." She unpacked her offerings: homemade cookies, practical kitchen tools, a handmade quilt in subtle blues and greens. "This was meant to be a graduation gift," she explained, smoothing the quilt over my bed. "But your parents suggested waiting until you were settled." As we settled with tea at my small table, her expression grew serious. "Abigail, I need to tell you something. I've noticed the differences in how your parents treat you and Amanda. I've noticed for years." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. For so long, I'd questioned my own perception, wondering if I was imagining or exaggerating the disparities. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, not accusingly, but genuinely curious. She sighed, her hands wrapping around her teacup. "I tried in subtle ways. Your father, my son, has always been defensive about parenting choices. When the twins were younger, I suggested they might be favoring Amanda. They insisted I was misinterpreting normal differences in how children respond to attention." "So you knew," I whispered. "I knew," she confirmed, "and I regret not being more direct, more supportive of you. The graduation gifts were." She paused, shaking her head. "They were inappropriate." The validation was both painful and healing. Someone else in the family had seen it. I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. "There's something else," she continued, reaching into her purse. She withdrew a small jewelry box. "This was my mother's, your great-grandmother's. It's a locket with room for 2 photographs. She left specific instructions that it should be shared between twin granddaughters if there ever were any." She opened the box, revealing an elegant gold locket on a delicate chain. "Your father has had this since my mother passed, with instructions to give it to you and Amanda upon graduation. I inquired about it recently and discovered he'd given it to Amanda alone before her trip to document her European adventure." My heart sank at this new evidence of exclusion, but Grandma Eleanor wasn't finished. "I confronted him," she said, a hint of steel entering her voice. "I reminded him of my mother's explicit wishes. He returned the locket to me, claiming it was an oversight." She closed the box and pressed it into my hands. "This belongs equally to both of you. Amanda can have it after you've worn it for the same amount of time she has." The gesture represented more than jewelry. It was a correction of an injustice, an acknowledgement of my equal place in the family legacy. I fastened it around my neck immediately, the weight of it against my collarbone oddly comforting. Over the next few hours, Grandma Eleanor shared family stories I'd never heard, photos I'd never seen. She revealed patterns of favoritism that had existed in prior generations, including my father's experience as the less favored child compared to his older brother. "Understanding doesn't excuse," she emphasized, "but sometimes it helps make sense of painful patterns. Your father is repeating what he experienced, though with his own children reversed." Before leaving, she pressed an envelope into my hand. "I know starting out is expensive," she said firmly. "This isn't charity, it's an investment in my granddaughter's future." Inside was a check that would cover 3 months of rent, enough breathing room to establish financial stability without constant anxiety. I tried to protest, but she waved away my objections. "Amanda has had plenty of advantages," she said simply. "Consider this balancing the scales just a little." After she left, I stood at my window watching her drive away, the locket warm against my skin, her check representing freedom I hadn't anticipated. For the first time, I felt truly seen by a member of my family. The validation wasn't complete healing, but it was a powerful step forward. That evening, I called Dr. Chen and scheduled an additional session to process this development. "It's significant," she agreed when we met. "Someone within the family system has acknowledged the dysfunction. That's rare and valuable." The following weekend, I visited Grandma Eleanor at her home, where she showed me family albums and artifacts I'd never seen. Together, we pieced together a family history more complex than I'd known, identifying generational patterns that helped explain, though not excuse, my parents' behavior. "Your grandmother has become an ally," Dr. Chen observed in our next session. "That changes the family dynamic in important ways." With my grandmother's emotional and financial support supplementing my own determination, my independence solidified more quickly than anticipated. By August's end, I had established professional momentum at Meridian, created a home that reflected my personality, built meaningful social connections, and developed a more nuanced understanding of my family history. The pain wasn't gone, but it had transformed from a gaping wound to a healing scar, tender still but no longer debilitating. I could see Amanda's European photos without immediate resentment, recognizing that her experience didn't diminish mine. I could receive my parents' occasional texts without spiraling into hurt and anger. The gift card remained unused in my wallet, a reminder not of what I lacked, but of how far I'd come from needing their validation. Thanksgiving loomed on the calendar like an approaching storm. Since my gradual withdrawal from family events, my parents had maintained a strategic pressure campaign of guilt-laden texts and voicemails about holiday expectations. The message was clear: my absence was causing unnecessary drama, and the solution was simple conformity to family norms. "Will you go?" Dr. Chen asked during our session the week before Thanksgiving. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to maintain boundaries. Another part wonders if avoiding them entirely just allows the dysfunction to continue unchallenged." We developed a strategic approach for either decision-specific phrases to establish boundaries if I attended, and a clear communication plan if I declined. After days of deliberation, I chose confrontation over avoidance. "I'll join for Thanksgiving dinner," I texted my mother. Arriving at 3, leaving by 7. Her immediate response, "We eat at 2, exemplified the control dynamics at play. I held firm, "I'll be there at 3. Setting this small boundary was practice for the larger ones to come. I prepared methodically in the days before, rehearsing responses with Dr. Chen and processing anxiety with physical exercise and meditation. William offered to be my extraction contact. I would text if I needed an excuse to leave early, and he would call with a fabricated emergency. Rachel helped me select an outfit that made me feel confident and polished. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold. I drove to my parents' house with a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. Amanda's homecoming signs still visible in the front yard nearly 4 months after her return from Europe. My mother answered the door with a tight smile. "We've already started appetizers," she said, her tone conveying disapproval of my timing. The living room tableau was familiar, Amanda, at the center of a family conversation, describing her recent promotion at the public relations firm where she'd been hired after returning from Europe. Our father nodded approvingly while our mother refreshed Amanda's drink. Grandma Eleanor sat slightly apart, her eyes meeting mine with quiet support. "Abby's here," my grandmother announced, rising to embrace me. Conversation paused briefly as family members offered perfunctory greetings before returning to Amanda's career narrative. I settled beside Grandma Eleanor, drawing strength from her presence. Dinner proceeded with predictable dynamics. My parents peppered Amanda with interested questions about her work projects and social life, while directing only superficial inquiries my way. I responded briefly but politely, conserving emotional energy for the moment I'd planned. That moment arrived during dessert. As my mother served pumpkin pie with a flourish, my father raised his wine glass. A toast to our family, especially Amanda's success at Paragon PR. 3 months, and already handling client accounts independently. Glasses clinked around the table. The moment of celebration created the perfect opening. "I have news too," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Meridian is publishing the anthology I edited, and I've been promoted to assistant editor." My announcement landed in momentary silence before my mother offered, "That's nice, dear," and immediately pivoted. "Amanda, tell everyone about the client dinner you attended." The dismissal was so blatant that even extended family members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Actually, I continued, setting down my fork deliberately. I'd like to finish sharing my news. The promotion includes a significant raise and byline credit on all projects I edit. It's a rare achievement for someone 6 months out of college. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We're proud of you too, Abby." But we were discussing Amanda's accomplishment. "You're always discussing Amanda's accomplishments," I replied calmly. "Mine are consistently treated as afterthoughts if acknowledged at all." The table fell silent. My mother's face tightened with embarrassment and anger. "This is hardly the time." "When would be the time?" I asked. "When I visit for Christmas and receive another token gift while Amanda gets something substantial. When you ask about my job in passing while spending hours discussing Amanda's work challenges. This pattern has defined our family dynamics my entire life." My father's face flushed. "That's not fair, Abigail. We've always supported both of you equally. A $10 gift card versus a 3-week European tour is not equal support." I countered, my voice still measured despite my racing heart. My mother stood abruptly. "I don't think we need to air family matters in front of everyone." "The disparity happens in front of everyone," I noted. "Why shouldn't the acknowledgement of it?" My aunt, Clara, my mother's sister, unexpectedly interjected. "She has a point, Ellen. The graduation gifts were wildly uneven. We all noticed but didn't want to say anything." The external validation shifted the dynamic instantly. My parents could dismiss my perception, but not the observations of extended family. "We make different choices for our daughters based on their different needs," my father insisted defensively. "You've never asked about my needs," I replied. "You've assigned me a role, practical, independent, low maintenance, and made decisions accordingly, regardless of my actual desires or feelings." The tension escalated as my parents' denials grew more adamant. I maintained my composure, stating specific examples of disparate treatment, calmly but firmly. When my mother suggested I was being unnecessarily dramatic, I stood up. "I'm going to get some air," I announced, heading for the front door. To my surprise, Amanda followed me onto the porch. We stood silently for several moments watching our breath form clouds in the cold November air. "I never asked to be the favorite," she finally said, her voice small. I glanced at her, startled by the admission that favoritism existed, something my parents had always denied. "I know," I replied. "It's not actually great, you know," she continued. "There's so much pressure to be the person they want me to be. The outgoing one, the social butterfly, the one who follows their expectations perfectly. Sometimes I envy your freedom." Her confession revealed a perspective I'd never considered, that the golden child role carried its own constraints and pressures. For the first time, I saw Amanda not as the beneficiary of an unfair system, but as another player trapped in prescribed family roles. "The Europe trip," she said hesitantly. "I didn't know about your gift until dinner. If I had known, I would have said something." "Would you?" I asked. Not accusingly, but genuinely curious. She looked away. "I'd like to think so. But honestly, I don't know. I've never challenged them." This moment of authentic vulnerability bridged years of growing distance between us. Though dramatically different in experience and treatment, we shared the foundation of being shaped by the same dysfunctional family system. "Maybe we could try," I suggested. "Together." Amanda nodded slowly. "They might actually listen if it's both of us." We re-entered the dining room where uncomfortable small talk had resumed. My parents looked up warily as we approached the table hand in hand, presenting a united front for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. "We need to talk about this as a family," Amanda stated firmly. "Abby isn't imagining things. There has been a clear pattern of favoritism toward me." My father began to protest, but Amanda continued with uncharacteristic assertiveness. "Dad, please listen. I've benefited from it, but that doesn't make it right or healthy for any of us." The conversation that followed was difficult, painful, and incomplete. My parents alternated between defensive justifications and reluctant acknowledgments. My mother insisted they had different love languages for each daughter. My father maintained they had responded to our different personalities. Neither fully accepted responsibility for the impact of their choices. Nevertheless, small concessions emerged. My mother acknowledged they perhaps hadn't celebrated my academic achievements appropriately. My father admitted the graduation gifts had been unfortunately imbalanced. They agreed with obvious reluctance to family therapy sessions after the holidays. As I prepared to leave that evening, hitting my planned 7 p.m. departure, Grandma Eleanor hugged me tightly. "You did well," she whispered. "Change comes slowly in families, but it starts with truth." Amanda walked me to my car. "Thank you," she said, "for not hating me for their choices." "I'm working on it," I admitted. "It's a process." We hugged briefly, awkwardly, but with genuine affection. "Text me about those therapy appointments," I asked. She nodded. "I'll make sure they follow through." Driving back to my apartment, I felt simultaneously drained and invigorated. The confrontation hadn't yielded the complete acknowledgement and apology I'd once fantasized about, but it had cracked open a door previously sealed shut. Most importantly, it had transformed my relationship with Amanda, creating possibility where resentment had festered. At home, I texted William and Rachel with a brief update: "Survived. Some progress." Amanda surprised me. Then I removed the unused gift card from my wallet, studying it thoughtfully before placing it in a small memory box on my bookshelf. It would remain there not as a reminder of hurt, but as a marker of the journey toward healing that had begun with that small, inadequate rectangle of plastic. 6 months after that pivotal Thanksgiving conversation, spring sunshine streamed through the windows of my new office at Meridian Publishing. My promotion to full editor had come with a window view, a modest salary increase, and my name on the masthead of our quarterly literary review. The anthology I'd shepherded had received favorable reviews in industry publications, establishing my professional reputation independently of family connections or university affiliations. I swiveled in my chair to survey the personal touches I'd added to the space-framed artwork purchased from local artists, a bookshelf organized by genre and influence, rather than alphabetically fresh flowers I bought myself each Monday. These small declarations of identity and preference represented the broader transformation in my life, the growing confidence to define myself on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from my new roommate Lucia confirming our plans to host a dinner party that weekend. After my lease ended, I'd chosen to share a 2-bedroom apartment in a vibrant neighborhood rather than another solitary studio. The decision reflected my evolving priorities: community over isolation, connection over self-protection. My social circle had expanded organically through work relationships, a writing group, and volunteer work at a literacy nonprofit. The journey with my family continued along its complicated path. The promised therapy sessions had materialized, though sporadically, and with varying levels of engagement from my parents. My mother participated reluctantly, often becoming defensive when the therapist identified problematic patterns. My father attended dutifully but remained largely silent, uncomfortable with emotional exploration. Still, small changes emerged: birthday gifts of equal thought and value for Amanda and me, genuine questions about my work, invitations issued with respect for my boundaries rather than expectation of compliance. Amanda had proven to be the most surprising element in the family reconfiguration. Once the golden child facade cracked, she revealed her own frustrations with our parents' rigid expectations. Our relationship, once defined primarily by comparison and competition, evolved into a tentative alliance. We weren't best friends, our lives and personalities remained distinctly different, but we had established a foundation of mutual respect and occasional authentic connection. Grandma Eleanor remained my steadfast supporter, visiting my apartment monthly and maintaining regular phone contact between visits. Her stories about our family history provided context for understanding the generational patterns of favoritism and emotional withholding. "Your grandfather did the same with your father and uncle," she explained. "Your father swore he'd never replicate the pattern, but without awareness, we often recreate what we know." This understanding didn't excuse my parents' behavior, but offered perspective that helped me process my experiences with less personal pain. The favoritism hadn't been about my inherent worth or Amanda's superiority. It had been about my parents' unresolved issues and limited emotional tools. The graduation gift cards, still unused, had taken on unexpected significance in my healing journey. During a particularly insightful therapy session with Dr. Chen, I'd realized I was saving it for some symbolic purpose I couldn't quite articulate. "What would feel right?" she had asked. After consideration, I found my answer. On a spring afternoon, I invited my mentor from university, Dr. Winters, for coffee at an independent bookshop near campus. I used the gift card finally to purchase our drinks. As we settled at a corner table, I shared my career progress and personal growth. Dr. Winters listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about my professional goals and creative aspirations. When I mentioned the anthology's success, she smiled warmly. "I'm not surprised," she said. "You've always had exceptional editorial instincts. But I'm most impressed by your resilience in navigating your personal challenges while building your career." "I had good guides," I replied, gesturing to include her among them. She considered me thoughtfully before offering the advice that would become my mantra. "You know, Abby, the most powerful thing you've done is write your own story instead of accepting the narrative others created for you. That's the true mark of an editor, knowing which stories need revision." Those words crystallized the transformation of the past year. I had indeed revised my personal narrative, rejecting the limiting role of practical twin while embracing the complexity of my actual identity. I had edited out toxic expectations while preserving valuable connections. I had created space for new characters and experiences to enter the storyline. The healing wasn't complete, perhaps it never would be entirely. Certain family gatherings still triggered old insecurities. Occasional comments from my parents revealed persistent blind spots. The golden child, divided by scapegoat dynamic, sometimes re-emerged during stress or conflict. The difference was that now I recognized these patterns immediately and had developed tools to respond effectively rather than internalizing the hurt. I had also learned crucial lessons about forgiveness, specifically that forgiveness didn't require forgetting or full reconciliation. I could acknowledge my parents' limitations and choose compassionate boundaries without surrendering my self-respect or emotional well-being. I could release resentment toward Amanda without pretending our childhood experiences had been equal. Most importantly, I had discovered that family extends beyond blood relation. My chosen family, Rachel William, work colleagues, writing group members, Lucia, even Dr. Chen provided connection and support without the complicated history of my biological family. These relationships, freely chosen and mutually nurturing, balanced the continuing complexities of family ties. By summer's end, the graduation gift disparity had faded from a defining injury to a significant but manageable chapter in my life story. The $10 gift card finally emptied, and now preserved in my memory box, had paradoxically purchased something invaluable: the conversation with Dr. Winters that had shifted my perspective from victim to author of my own life. When Amanda called to share news of her own professional achievement, a client campaign that had earned industry recognition, I could congratulate her with genuine pleasure rather than comparative assessment. When my parents invited me to dinner to discuss their tentative plans for a family vacation with equal input from both daughters, I could attend without anxiety about hidden agendas or familiar patterns. The greatest gift I ultimately gave myself was permission to define success by my own standards rather than in comparison to Amanda or in pursuit of parental validation. My worth wasn't determined by graduation gifts or family dynamics, but by the authentic life I was building daily through meaningful work, honest relationships, and continuing self-discovery. Life isn't about receiving equal treatment or perfect understanding from others. It's about honoring your own journey, even when others can't or won't. Sometimes the smallest gifts, like that $10 card, open doors to the most significant growth if we're willing to look beyond the initial disappointment to the possibilities beyond. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family? How did you navigate those difficult dynamics? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in these experiences can be incredibly healing. And if you found value in my journey, please hit the like button, subscribe for more authentic life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear they're not alone. Thank you for witnessing my story with such compassion. Remember, you are worthy of recognition and love, regardless of how others may see you.